The Hollow Kingdom by Clare B. Dunkle. Part 1, Starlight, Chapter 2. The change in Kate was obvious to all, but no one understood it. Prim and Celia were sure Kate's restless unhappiness was due to disappointment. Prim assured her that Hugh would give in to their arguments and take her into town, but Kate no longer wanted to go. In the aftermath of her guardian's horrible disclosure, society parties had gone quite out of her head. Kate couldn't bear for her little sister to find out that they weren't really family, so she said nothing about what she had learned, and she tried to keep up a cheerful appearance. But keeping a secret from a loved one is a heavy burden, and now she was keeping two secrets. Her nightmares were wearing her out, and her worried sister's constant questions were upsetting her. Prim noticed the pale cheeks and dark shadows under her niece's eyes. Lips tight, she called the doctor, but neither he nor Prim could find anything wrong. Between them, they dosed Kate with a variety of strong and well-meaning remedies that did no good at all. The weather changed with the approaching end of the summer, and clouds gathered over the hill. One breathless afternoon nothing could bring relief to spirit or body. A gray haze hung in the air, too diffuse to be called clouds, but too thick to be anything else. The sun shone through it as a brilliant white spot, but not a whisper of wind stirred. As evening came, no thunder rumbled in the hills, and no breeze sprang up to fan their clammy cheeks. The sun was leaving without a blaze of color. The thick haze just seemed to swallow it. "Please, Aunt Prim, let us walk up the hill and see if we can't find some cool wind somewhere," Kate begged. "I promise we'll be back before it gets dark." Her aunt knew better to let her go. Storms were sure to follow a day like this, even if they were taking their time building. But at last she gave consent, with all the conditions that the approaching storms and nightfall demanded. They were to stay out of the woods, watch the sky, and come back at first sign of bad weather. The girls headed down through the orchard, intent on the rocky meadow below. Kate was sure if they climbed to the top of one of those grassy hills they were bound to find a breeze, but at the top of their meadow they found no breath stirring. The twilight was blending with a strange, close sky to form a dark brown haze, and the grass at their feet shone with a blonde shimmer, as if the few rays of light left could not rise above the surface of the ground. Landmarks even a few yards away were melting into the brown gloom. Purple lightning bloomed across the dark sky before them. "We'd better go back," sighed Kate. They waded through the grass back down the hillside. Ahead of them in the thick dusk stood the stone wall of the meadow, but no gate appeared as they followed the meadow's edge. "Wait, Em, we must have gotten turned around. The gate's over there." As their fence formed a corner with another stone fence, the gate appeared a few feet from them, white boards gleaming in the dim light. They hurried over to it as another shining purple curtain shook across the sky, and swinging the gate shut they sped up the little road before them. A couple of minutes later they stopped short in bewilderment. Another stone fence blocked their path. But how was this possible? They should be at the orchard by now. The two girls climbed the slight rise and looked in all directions, trying to make out the shapes of trees that marked the orchard. Some faint light still remained. They could see each other's faces, pale in the deep dusk, but now they couldn't distinguish the black horizon from the black cloud banks. The lightning undulating over the swollen mass of clouds was distant and too weak to be seen by. It gleamed silently, first in front of them, then behind them. "This makes no sense," Kate said firmly, thinking over the way they had come. "All we had to do was walk back down the hill, through the gate, and up the orchard. We've missed the gate somehow. There must have been two in that meadow, and we hit the other one. We'll follow the road back and look for the other gate out of that field, the one that takes us to the orchard." With that plan in mind they started off confidently, but now their light was gone. They found the little road again, more by feel than sight, but it didn't lead them to the gate. It turned and skirted along another stone wall, went through a tumbled-down gap, and lost itself altogether in a narrow draw. Again and again Kate tried desperately to find the right path in the darkness, making them retrace their steps, but each time they did, they lost their old landmarks. Everything seemed to shift in the darkness around them. They had no idea which direction they faced or where home was. All they could tell was they were moving farther and farther from the shelter of the woodlands. The fields were flattening out, and stone fences were becoming rare. There followed a time that was worse in their lives. Method was gone, and landmarks were forgotten. They blundered along hand in hand through the dense blackness, following any path they crossed. Lightning seemed to be all around them now, and every white flash lit up a dreary landscape that held no familiar sight. One black field followed another. They might be 1 mile from home, or they might be 10. They certainly felt that they had walked 100. As they stumbled along, footsore and exhausted, Emily let out an excited squeal and tugged Kate around. Far across the fields a light was shining. It wavered, winked out, then showed up again. The girls turned and scrambled towards it. The light was a bonfire, blazing up in the darkness with a reddish glow, and figures moved back and forth before it. The fire lit up no house or barn. It appeared to be built in the middle of an empty field. Kate began to watch the figures by the fire uneasily. A hunting party? Gypsies? Vagabonds? 2 men stood by the fire in long cloaks, their hoods pulled down over their faces. That spoke perhaps of hunting and of the stormy weather. 2 or 3 short people moved around as well. Children? They had to be, but there was something odd about their shapes. As the girls came nearer, Kate noticed 4 horses standing patiently beyond the fire. They appeared to be saddled. Hunting, then, but who would be out on such a night? She began to slow down, not so anxious to walk out of the darkness towards this strange group. But Emily, clutching Kate's hand, began to speed up. Warmth, light, people, these held no fears for her. She broke into a trot, pulling her sister beside her. The party turned, sensing their approach. One of the short figures broke away from the firelit circle and bustled towards them. "Oh, look! 2 pretty girls right out of the storm! Do let old Agatha tell your fortunes, dears." "Gypsies!" whispered Emily excitedly, as Agatha hurried up. Kate stared down, astonished, at the shortest woman she had ever seen. Agatha came up only slightly past Kate's waist, but her small, stocky body did not appear to be hunched or twisted. The old face was seamed into countless wrinkles, and the black eyes snapped and sparkled in the firelight. "Here," she said, capturing Kate's hand in her own surprisingly large one. "Come by the fire so I can see your pretty face." As Kate followed Agatha over to the bonfire, she glanced around nervously at the other members of the party. The 2 men stood nearby. Only one was a little taller than she, thick and barrel-chested. The other man, of average height, towered over him. Perhaps they had been conversing before, but now they were silent, watching Agatha and the 2 girls. They were draped in the black cloaks and hood that she had noticed earlier, and she could see nothing at all of their faces. This was prudent, given the coming storm, but it irked Kate to be seen and not to see. She wished she had a cloak of her own. Agatha, meanwhile, was peering intently at Kate's palm, turning it this way and that in the firelight. "Oh," she breathed, "not every young lady has a hand like this." Kate heard chuckles from the men. "But, dear," she said, ignoring them, "I see danger in this hand. Danger from someone very close to you." Then the men roared with laughter. "Be quiet, the 2 of you," she whirled on them, still holding Kate fast. "I'm very serious." "What about me?" demanded Emily eagerly, holding her hand out to the old woman. "Do you see danger in my hand?" The old woman took her small palm and turned it towards the fire. "And such a lively thing you are, my dear," she said to Emily. "Still a long way from marriage, aren't you? Well, that can't be helped. And one does grow, you know." Emily giggled over this odd speech, but Kate frowned. Hugging her arms around her, she stepped back from the fire and eyed the 2 men warily. Now they had turned away and were talking again in quiet tones. She couldn't seem to catch what they were saying. The taller one threw his head back and laughed at something the short one said. She noticed as he laughed that he carried one shoulder higher than the other. "Your palm speaks of tears early, but laughter later," Agatha summed up grandly. "That's as good as palms can say. You've a lovely, open nature, child." "Oh, Kate, look!" Emily called excitedly. Kate turned to see a huge black tomcat approaching the fire. It rubbed its head against Emily's knee, its velvet coat shining in the light. Kate felt as if she couldn't breathe. Surely that cat was 6 times larger than the largest cat she'd ever seen. "Isn't he beautiful?" squealed Emily, kneeling to tickle his chin. She loved animals of all descriptions, and her greatest regret was that the aunts wouldn't let her keep pets. The enormous cat was almost eye to eye with her. "Meow?" he said plainly, and that is just what it sounded like, a meow said by a person intimidating a cat. Kate shook her head and stared hard at the giant feline, as if he were a puzzle she needed to solve. Something needed explaining here. Perhaps she was just dreaming?